Just as much as corruption, criminality, and cover-ups have been the themes of the last few weeks of Donald Trump's administration, so has humiliation. Donald Trump has been humiliated by the members of his own party revolting against him, humiliated by the fact that he has to literally run away from a scandal, and humiliated by the world leaders who are making a mockery of his tariffs. Yes, the taco man just got hit with another embarrassment, and it led him to melt down at 3 in the morning last night on Truth Social. We're going to get into it all, but before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button because it goes a long way in supporting our work. Now, although Donald Trump would lead you to believe that his trip to the UK, his meetings with the leaders of the European Union was tremendously successful, that's not the case. And it starts with what Jessica Tarlov had to say right here.
So before this deal with the EU, we have to be clear that every trade war that we are engaging in, Donald Trump brought that one up himself, except for China. China is the one that you really have an issue with, but we essentially had favored nations with the EU being about 1% import. So 15% is a lot more than 1%. And I rarely say that I wish somebody else would take my seat, at least for this segment, but I wish Charlie Gasparino was sitting here right now to explain to Jesse again how tariffs work, because it is a tax on the American consumer. The American consumer knows that. That's why they don't rate Trump particularly highly on how to handle inflation, cost of living, tariffs, and trade wars. And you also see headlines like Walmart raising prices up to 51%. They're doing that because they're not going to eat the tariff. They're going to pass it on to you. Volkswagen, profits down $1.5 billion. GM, profits down $1 billion. Why is that? Because of these trade wars that Donald Trump created. Now, there is this $20 billion in revenue that's coming in, right? I've seen the headlines. I've seen the panicans backing off. But if it weren't going to be a clear line to raising your individual prices, why is Donald Trump, and Josh Hawley now wants to get in on it, talking about rebate checks for the American public? They want another opportunity for Donald Trump to smack his signature, which has been all over the place as we've seen recently,
not
on
with
another
an
rebate, not with an auto pen, on rebate checks so that the American public won't hate him for the fact that he is raising their cost of living. And that is what is going on here.
All right.
Donald Trump's tariffs have always been a big joke, a fake power play to make the weakest and most insecure man in America pretend that he's a big, strong, tough guy. Even those within the White House don't take the tariff seriously because they just know it's a joke. Donald Trump likes sending the letters. He likes talking tough. He doesn't know what the word means still after all these months. It's been a year since he announced it as his favorite thing on the campaign trail, and he is still a blubbering idiot while trying to describe an economic policy that doesn't work. Donald Trump applauds himself when he puts tariffs on, and he applauds himself when he takes them off. He doesn't know how they work, and that's been made very clear after the deal he supposedly made on his tariffs was exposed as just a joke. And after that happened, we saw him completely implode on Truth Social. EU admits it can't guarantee $600 billion promise to Trump. The extra investments pledged under the trade deal would come from private companies, which Brussels conceded it has no power to control. The European Union has admitted it didn't have the power to deliver on a promise to invest $600 billion in the United States economy only hours after making the pledge at landmark trade talks in Scotland. That's because the cash would come entirely from private sector investment over which Brussels has no authority, two EU officials said. On Sunday, European Commissioner President struck a deal with the U.S. and Donald Trump to avoid an all-out U.S.-EU trade war. The deal included a pledge to invest an extra $600 billion of EU money into the U.S. over the coming years. But speaking Monday, two senior European Commission officials clarified that money would come exclusively from private European companies with public investment contributing nothing. It is not something the EU as a public authority can guarantee. It is something which is based on the intentions of the private companies, said one of the senior Commission officials. The Commission has not said that it will introduce any incentives to ensure private sector meets the $600 billion target, nor given a precise time frame for the investment. However, the first official said the $600 billion figure was based on detailed discussions with different business associates and companies in order to see what their investment intentions are. This led to a meltdown from Trump on Truth Social, with him writing, "I'm in Scotland now after having just completed the EU deal and numerous others. The United States is doing great, to put it mildly." Also adding in on China, the fake news is reporting that I am seeking a summit with President Xi of China. This is not correct. I am not seeking anything. I may go to China, but it would only be at the invitation of President Xi, which has been extended. Otherwise, no interest. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So Donald Trump has been humiliated once again on the world stage, exposed for being the idiot we all know he is. And now he's claiming that he's done the greatest deals and everyone wants him to hang and everyone really likes him, because that's what's important here. Little Donnie needs to feel liked. He needs to feel loved and cherished. And that's not the case, Donald. Nobody likes you. Nobody wants to hang out with you. You're almost 80 years old and you're acting, I don't even want to disparage second graders in saying you're so dependent. Even they go off and draw and build Legos by themselves. Trump can't spend a second alone without bleeding or throwing ketchup. And he's now making that our problem as he tanks the economy and it puts an effective tax with his idiotic tariffs on working people. That is the current state of the state-run Donald Trump economy. All while at the same time, Donald Trump is making sure he cashes in on leaders who want to sway him. And of course, I'm talking about his Qatari jet, which we just got some very unfortunate news about. That, yeah, Donald Trump is stealing our tax dollars, and from a very uncomfortable place to do so. And Rachel Maddow broke it all down right here.
We keep nuclear weapons underground in this country, in big, they call them silos. They are shaped like farm silos that hold grain, but instead of going up, they go down. And all over the northern plain states, we have these underground silos, these massive underground fortresses, which hold huge nuclear-armed intercontinental ballistic missiles in Montana, Wyoming, North Dakota. And a lot of them, especially the first ones that we built, are up in that northern tier of the country because they are a Cold War relic. And the idea was that you'd want them in the inland northern tier of the U.S., A, so you'd have plenty of time to see any incoming threat to those sites flying in from either coast. So you wanted them way inland. But B, you also wanted them way north, so you could fire those intercontinental ballistic missiles north over the Arctic Circle as the fastest path to go hit Moscow, right? To go hit Russia, or I guess the Soviet Union, since it was a Cold War thing. And there were some earlier missile silos with different kinds of weapons, but mostly what we think of when we think of those nuclear missile silos on the northern plains, mostly what we think of are the Minuteman sites for these huge 50-foot-long nuclear-armed intercontinental missiles, the Minuteman missiles. And those Minuteman missile sites in Montana, North Dakota, Wyoming, those started to go in the early to mid-1960s. And they are still there and still functioning today, because we as a country still have thousands of live nuclear weapons that we maintain in a constant state of readiness because sure, why not? But if you're going to decide as a country to do that, one thing you can't then do is let those nuclear weapons and those nuclear weapons sites fall into disrepair, right? This isn't like old books or soccer balls that you stashed in a milk crate on a shelf in your garage and forgot about, and look, the mice got to them. Right? These are real live nuclear weapons that need upkeep and modernization. They need care and tending. So a few months ago, there was a review of the physical condition of these decades-old silos where to this day we keep hundreds and hundreds of these huge nuclear weapons. And at the end of that review, the Air Force reported, we need to dig all new silos for our nuclear missiles Turns out the silos we dug starting in the 1960s aren't going to last forever. They're leaking, they're crumbling, they're no place to keep live nuclear weapons, and the crews that watch them and maintain them and stand ready to launch them 24 hours a day. So we need new silos. We need new physical sites for these ground-based nukes. And if that sounds expensive, you are right. But also, you've got to, right? I mean, maybe we shouldn't actually have these nuclear weapons. That's an argument that might be worth having. But if we're not having that argument and we are going to keep these nuclear missiles, all these thousands of them, right, then we do have to keep them safely. If we're going to have the nukes, we've got no choice but to maintain them and upgrade them as needed to keep them safe. Right. Right. We can all agree on that. Right. Right. Well, President Donald Trump is now robbing the ground-based nuclear missiles safety and modernization budget for himself. He is robbing that budget. Quote, "No one wants to discuss a mysterious $934 million transfer of funds from the Pentagon project to modernize America's aging ground-based nuclear missiles. But that amount, $934 million, was slipped into an obscure Pentagon document sent to Capitol Hill as a transfer to an unnamed classified project. In recent weeks, congressional budget sleuths have come to think that that amount almost certainly includes the renovation of the new gold-adorned airplane from Qatar that President Trump desperately wants to be in the air before his term is over. Air Force officials privately acknowledge, quote, dipping into nuclear modernization funds for the airplane project." That's from reporters David Sanger and Eric Schmidt at the New York Times. And just to underscore that last point again, just in case that didn't sink in, they actually say it twice in the article. When asked last week, the Air Force said it simply could not discuss the cost or anything else about the airplane because it is classified. But Air Force officials privately concede that they are paying for the renovations of the Qatari Air Force One with the transfer from the Pentagon program to rebuild America's aging, leaky ground-launched nuclear missile system. So our aging, leaky, ground-launched nuclear missile system needs some attention, needs a little TLC because, you know, they're huge armed nuclear missiles under the ground in Montana and Wyoming and all over the place in silos built for them, 60 years ago. So they need a little TLC, our live nuclear weapons, but Trump is taking the money from that program for himself.
I really just can't anymore. This administration, I just can't. I can't believe, honestly, that I didn't forget about the jet. I've still been talking about the jet, but we're getting more jet news. We're getting a new jet scandal. How many scandals can Pete Hegseth be involved in, by the way? There's got to be a limit. I know this is the Trump administration, but I just feel like he's gone over his allotment, even for an idiotic drunk like him. But I guess we're just going to have to keep calling it out. We're certainly going to be doing so on this show. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video. And if you're stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.